My next guest is Jessica Lee Haxi. Jessica has been the supervisor of world languages for New Haven Public Schools in Connecticut since 2013, overseeing 85 teachers of Arabic, ASL, Chinese, French, Italian, Japanese, Latin, Pashto, and Spanish. She also teaches one Japanese class at James Hillhouse High School. Jessica was president of ACTFL in 2021 and is a past president of the American Association of Teachers of Japanese. She has served on the Northeast Council of the Teaching of Foreign Languages Board from 2006 to 2010, the ACTFL NCSSFL Can Do Statements Committee, and the original National Standards Committee for Japanese. Previously, Jessica taught Japanese for 20 years in a pre-K through 5 program and has taught world language methods as an adjunct instructor at local universities in Connecticut. She has received the Milken Family Foundation National Teacher Award in 2002, the U.S. Japan Foundational Elgon Heinz Outstanding Japanese Teacher Award in 2008, and the International Women's Day New Haven Award for Outstanding Public Service in 2019. Well, welcome to the podcast, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Yeah, so I reached out to you after attending one of your sessions at ACTFL this past November, and it's always a pleasure to have fellow world language educators on the podcast, and somebody who's been really involved for just as long as I have, and really involved at the national and the state level as well. We'll start off with the story I ask everyone. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
All right. Well, it was early in my career when we were teaching. I was teaching Japanese in a pre-K to 5 magnet school program, and we really had a beautiful schedule set up where it was 3 times a week for either 20 minutes or 25 minutes, and that was really ideal for elementary school for the kids to learn a lot. And it was sort of in short bursts, but over time, which works really much better than say 45 minutes once a week. And then a little bit into it, the first grade teachers started deciding that that was just too much time out of the regular day. And like, I completely understood where they were coming from, but also from a new teacher perspective, it was terrifying because it sounded like they were basically saying that, they would be cutting our jobs or trying to get rid of our jobs. And we were so concerned about what would happen to the program. And especially if we went down to say once a week for 25 minutes, it was going to be barely worth doing because you'd have to just review everything all over again anyhow. And we would have lost one of the positions. There were 2 of us working full time at that point. So what we did was, and looking back on it, of course, we didn't know we were doing anything smart at the time. But what we did was we said, well, it's not really our decision because at the time the state had actually financed our magnet school. They had paid for the building. And the way it worked was they had entered into some sort of agreement with the city saying that you have to have these magnets that you said you were going to have, and Japanese was one of them. So we had this bright idea that we would say, okay, it's not really our decision. Why don't we ask the state? And so what happened was my principal brought in the state evaluators for the magnet schools, and we presented, and we got to show them the results that we had from students having 3 times a week. We invited them to our classes. We did a big dog and pony show to show them how much students were getting out of Japanese class in terms of proficiency, but also in terms of the other goals of the magnet school, which were, it was a multicultural magnet school. And we were really one of the only concrete things that were being done in that area. And at the end of the presentation, I'll never forget, the gentleman from the state said, well, if you want to cut Japanese, you can cut Japanese, but you're going to have to pay the state $16 million for this building. And it was such a great moment. We were like, yes. But we didn't begrudge the first grade teachers at all, but we just felt it was really, that's why it worked for us to not sort of fight it, but to just say, okay, I mean, if you think that's what needs to be done, but let's present it to someone higher than us. But then we made sure our presentation was really, on point. So I think that was one of the early success stories that taught me a lot about advocacy and just sort of how to handle those situations. Stomping our feet wouldn't have done much, but the way we handled it kind of worked.
Yeah, and it's really important to see how like there can be reasons within the building in terms of instructional minutes, in terms of enrollment, and those types of things that might threaten having the world language in the building. But you saw like this was a magnet school. You did the presentation. You were able to keep that in the building because of the reason that they had the magnet schools, the immersion schools. And you know, I understand that challenge a lot of the time when you're working in a building, and there's a lot of people who don't know a world language, right? They only speak English. So,
Hmm.
but being able to work in the advocacy realm from the get-go, right? Yeah, that's really an inspiring story. So let's talk a little bit about your current role. I said in the bio, so you're now the supervisor of world languages for New Haven Public Schools. And I mentioned that there are 9 languages. You're a district with 25,000 students. So tell
About
me a little bit of,
20,000. Yeah.
oh, 20,
Yeah.
20,000.
20,000. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about your role in working with teachers in the district and also how you fit in still teaching one class of Japanese.
Okay, so I guess first of all, my role is to just sort of support all the teachers. We have about 85 teachers, and my role is to support curriculum, assessment, and instruction across the district. I am not an evaluator of any of the teachers, so it allows me, it's a really nice structure. It allows to me to be pure support and coaching. I'm in schools every day. I spend most of my time with new teachers or teachers who are struggling. We have quite a few new teachers come every year for various reasons, and we often have teachers who are in like accelerated root programs, especially of those less common language like Arabic and Chinese and things like that. We'll have teachers in that program, so they require quite a lot of support because they're teaching full time while they're getting certified and they're doing ed TPA and those kinds of things. So I spend a lot of my time with that, and then of course I'm in charge of myriad other things in the district, a large grant that we have, and some other things. But I think that also goes back to sort of the advocacy things I've learned along the way. I have always said yes to anything any boss has asked me to do. So whether it was in my school when I was in elementary, if they said to me, "Will you run this, event for the school?" I'd be like, "Okay," and then I would figure it out. And same in my district, ever since I've been here, since 2013. If they ask me to manage a grant, I say yes. If they ask me to help out with AP, managing AP, I say yes, just because I've always kind of felt that I was always worried that world language was not something that they would see as needing to stay forever if I didn't make myself indispensable in other ways. I don't know that that's the case with all subject areas. I mean, I'm sure it isn't, but in world language, that's what I try to talk to other teachers about. Is one way to maintain your program is to also just be sort of a yes person and certainly not a negative person. um, that would be the worst thing to be, because the principal is certainly going to cut someone who's not pleasant to be around or not helping out at the school at all if cuts are going to be made. So in any case, so that's what I spend a lot of time doing that. And in terms of languages here, I'm sure people are wondering why we have so many. I was really lucky that when I got here that we already had 6 languages, including Arabic and Chinese. That was because years ago there was something I'm sure your listeners will recognize called Foreign Language Assistance Program grants, FLAP grants. And my predecessor did a lot of the work to get those languages started. And then I was lucky enough to get some grants from Qatar Foundation and from some other sources to sort of keep Arabic going. And I was lucky enough that the district kept the other languages going. And then little by little, when we saw a need and when a teacher left and we weren't able to find a language replacement, that's when we kind of would move these languages into spots that are funded by our regular general funds. And that's how we got Japanese. They had a Latin teacher leave. We couldn't find someone, but I knew I had a Japanese teacher coming up. And I said to the principal, "What do you think? Want to try Japanese?" This was like my 9th year. So it wasn't like I walked in and started Japanese here. And she said, "Yeah, the kids would love that. There's a lot of interest because of anime and things." And that's how we started Japanese in one of the schools. Initially, the student is one of my former students who I had when she was in elementary. And then Pashto is a little bit different. That's a language that we've seen come in because we're a sanctuary city, and we've seen a lot of Afghani refugees come in, and we're finding that they enter high school often having not, well, the girls especially, not having had a chance to read or write at all in their native language. So I started thinking, like, how can they possibly be expected to learn English if they've never even conceived of reading and writing? So we collaborated with our local immigration services here for funding to start a Pashto class as a world language credit for those kids this year. And that's been really amazing to see. Uh, and Japanese. So then about 3 years ago, I started feeling itchy, like I missed the kids. I also started feeling a little bit like I was losing my street cred with the teachers, because it's easy for me to say, like, try this, do this. And I do a lot of demos in Japanese in my professional learning meetings, but I still felt like I needed to be actually doing it in order to be able to say, do this, do that. So I started teaching that class 3 years ago. I do it first period, so 7:30 to 9. And my hours are really more like 9 to whatever, midnight. So it didn't really hurt anything for me to be busy 7:30 to 9. And then I just squeeze in the prep in the middle of the night. But I have to tell you, it's the best. It is just the most joyous part of my day. I love the kids. They're so cute. They're really good. They're just terrific. And it has helped me learn so much that helps my teachers. Like, now I know Power School inside out. I know how hard it is to fit the curriculum in when things are happening. It's endless how many things. But I also can say, look, I tried this with my kids last week. It works. And people pretty much believe me when I say that now. So it's been
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good that opportunity came along. And you said now you're teaching high school, which you didn't do before you took your
right.
current role. You used to just teach elementary. So you can really see the broad scape of how it is for elementary teachers, also like the challenges that high school teachers are having as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But ironically, I would say, and my friends and I, the Japanese teacher I mentioned, and my other
Hmm.
best friend Japanese teacher, we presented at ACTFL this past year on,
Hmm.
I know it was the year before, on basically everything you need to teach, you learn teaching kindergarten. And so
Hmm.
we went through all these examples showing like the kindergarten kids doing something, and then my high school kids doing the same thing
Hmm.
and enjoying it. Because the truth is, the best activities that they love the most, like
Hmm.
puppets and games and dice and all the things and movement and everything,
Hmm.
work really well with seniors in high school also. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's yeah, and a lot of people think like that, oh, they won't go for it, but I think high
oh
schoolers
no,
really like doing some of that fun stuff too. So we talked about your
100%.
work with advocacy and doing that as part of the Japanese teachers organization. Tell me a little bit about um, you were on a committee to get the seal of biliteracy in your state. So talk to me a little bit about some recent advocacy work you've done in the state of Connecticut.
Um, well, in Connecticut, I would say the majority of the work I've done in Connecticut was the Seal of Biliteracy work. Like many, many people across the country, Seal of Biliteracy passing was a grassroots type of movement. There were a number of other terrific folks in Connecticut who we all worked together on that. And we, visited with the Commissioner of Education at the time and really asked her to put that forward in the legislation. It actually went through once and didn't get passed because it was attached to something else that was unpopular. And so in the second year, she like separated it, and then it was its own bill, and then it passed. So we learned so much about, and I have to, if anyone else is thinking of doing this type of thing, it was really, really interesting and not impossible to figure out, but you had to learn when the legislature meets, when bills go through, when you're allowed to do public comment. That whole schedule and how process is something that I think most of us average citizens don't really realize. But to know that at the state level was really cool. And since then, I've felt more empowered, sort of, to follow things. So if I see a bill, I'll watch it go through if it relates to education. And just last week, actually, the State Board of Ed approved our new world language standards for Connecticut that we wrote. We took us along, a committee wrote, and then I was on the chair of the review of that document. And I went up to the state and I knew they had public comment because I remembered it from our previous experiences. So I was able to make public comments saying how great it was that, we had this support from the state and that we had these new standards. And I think anytime that they hear from you is a big deal. Even your local senator, your state senators, that's where a lot of the work happens. So when they send out those blasts and say, please, it usually takes 2 seconds to write to them, but often if that's the only information they get, that's what they go on. So I learned a lot about that stuff. And of course, at ACTFL and participating in language advocacy days, which we have with the Joint National Committee on Languages, JNCL, Nicholas, every year, that has helped me learn a lot too about how to do sort of national lobbying efforts. Connecticut, we have wonderful senators and representatives, so it's not hugely important, but it's still important that they know to support languages and support all the education funding.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like I saw in the Assembly of Delegates at ACTFL in November, there are a lot of states where they are reducing requirements for high school graduation for world language, or there are many states where the colleges are eliminating some languages, and there's less enrollment in world language programs. So I think just really continuing to be advocates at the state level. Like you said, you learned a lot from that process, and I would encourage any world language educator listening to, get involved with your state organization, become part of JNCL, follow ACTFL, subscribe for updates. So let's talk a little bit about the session I attended at ACTFL, which was called Baking in the Learning by Planning in Cycles. You can also talk a little bit about some of the other professional development that you've done recently.
Sure. So the one that you went to at ACTFL actually grew out of this desire I have to kind of keep every year. I just try to simplify world language proficiency-based instruction down to its simplest process, because I have all these teachers. The great majority of my teachers, their second language is English. And a lot of what we put out in the field is wonderful, but it's also very dense. And the English in it is often very confusing, I think, for them. And so I keep trying every year. I'm just sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall to see if it sticks. But every year I keep trying to distill down for my teachers what are the things I'm seeing that they're doing, and how can I help them maximize their time and still be providing great instruction. So this built out of last year, all year, we focused on this idea of there being like a lesson cycle. And I just sort of named it that. What it really is good teaching. It's that if you have some great activity or task you want the kids to do, you don't just start doing it. You do pre-teaching, that kind of gets them ready. And then you do something after, like post-teaching, that kind of extends the learning and bakes it in, if you will. And I'm a huge fan of metaphors and analogies. So as you saw, I used like a baking cookies analogy here. And so basically when you gather the ingredients in the first part, then you put them in, then you mix them together, and then you bake in the learning. So I'll just give a quick example. So, and then in world languages, we did this all year with my teachers, and I did it real quickly with you, where we talked about doing this for interpretive tasks, interpersonal tasks, and presentational tasks. So for example, for an interpretive task, and I'll just give this one example. Say the thing you really want to do is you found this terrific, authentic text. It's like an infographic, and you're going to have the kids look at it and answer questions about it. Great. So the pre-work for that, the gathering the ingredients, you need to gather what the kids need in order to interact with that successfully. If you just hand it to them, sometimes it's just going to fall flat because there's just too much they don't know, or they need some context. Or even if you think they're going to handle it, even just a hook to get them excited about it can also be sort of that gathering the ingredients first step. And so you sit down, you look at it, you think, what do they need to interact with this successfully? Do they just need a hook, or do they need vocabulary? Do I need to introduce some things with visuals, vocabulary, things like that? So you do that. Then another thing that we talked about, I think at the session, was that second step, which is mixing the ingredients together in their brains, is often done best in pairs. So even with an authentic text, I often like to put the kids in pairs to figure it out together, because I feel like the brain-based learning that happens when you're interacting with someone else figuring something out is actually worth it, even if they're speaking a little bit of English at that moment. That's okay with me. And certainly if it's an interpersonal task, they're in pairs. And then even presentational, it's good to have something where they're kind of planning it together, and then later you can have sort of the individual assessment of it. So anyway, back to the authentic text, they work in pairs, they do it, you go over it as a class, but then it would be easy to just go on to the next thing. So I see a lot of teachers be like, done, go on to the next thing, right? The thing I want to encourage teachers to do next is something that's fairly similar, or at least sort of assesses the same types of skills they needed to do that task. Give them one more thing and then make them do it on their own. And that's how you see that they've really baked in the learning that they did during that task together. And another reason for this is I see teachers doing like activity, one after another, and they've done so much work to like find these activities, make these activities, whatever it is, when they could have just stretched out one of them. So I'm hoping that the concept of it helps teachers save some prep time too. And it's nothing new. It's not rocket science, but it's just another way to think about it.
Yeah, I think the way you explained it can transfer to other subjects, and I think people can get an idea of what you mean by that. You also gave me an acronym in the pre-chat, the MAGIC acronym. Talk to me a little bit about that.
That's the presentation that I've done in the past. It is probably the most popular in terms of people still ask me about it. My teachers reference it all the time. So we had done some reading among our teachers. We did some book clubs around brain-based learning, and some terrific books on that. We also read some of Marcia Tate's books. She was actually one of my speakers when I was president of ACTFL that year, and also the wonderful book called Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain by Zaretta Hammond. If you haven't read that book, I strongly suggest it. And I was sitting on a plane and I had written down all these strategies that come up when you think about brain-based learning, like movement and music and chunking and challenge and all these things. And I also was writing down some of the sort of best practices from ACTFL, like using authentic texts and target language use. And also, of course, the brain likes interaction with other individuals. So I was staring at it, and I said to my daughter, I was like, "This must spell something. Like I know I got an acronym in here somewhere." And she just looked and she goes, "That smells magic." And I was like, "Oh my God!" So what we did was I created like it's almost a checklist, but it spells out the word magic. And the point is that all you have to do, it could be while you're lesson planning or after you've made your lesson, and then you take a look at it to sort of reflect on your lesson. You take one from each letter. So for example, M includes music, movement, and manipulatives. So if your lesson doesn't have music, movement, or manipulatives, if you add it, if you're able to go back in and make sure you do have it, that will increase the engagement level and the brain-based learning engagement level of your lesson. A stands for authentic texts or authentic experiences. So that can apply to any subject area, right? It's something from the real world. G refers to gaming, like any type of gaming, or we also say guessing and got it, where it's like the kids, even it could be as simple as you show the answers to something on the board, but instead you make a big deal and you're like, yes, and the kids are like, yes, I got it. That kind of feeling. And then I is interaction. And then C is chunking and challenge. And we actually added sort of creativity to that as well. So some kind of something creative that they do. But you don't have to do all of it every lesson. You just kind of look down and pick one from each letter. And if you pick one concept or one sort of strategy from each letter, your lesson will invariably improve. And I find it really helpful myself when I plan, when I'm feeling stuck. I just look over it. I'm like, oh, yeah, right. I could do that thing where they have to walk to the wall and look at something on the wall and come back and sit down and, whatever it might be. So that's magic.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And you said you'll provide me with a link I can put in
I
the show
will.
notes. Yeah. And then, so I think some of these strategies, like you said, you work a lot with the teachers in your district on them, but I think they can apply to any subject area where you want to get kids up and moving, think outside the box, do more project-based learning, et cetera. So in the bio, I mentioned also some of the roles that you've held. I think the most important one was the one that's outside the classroom, of course, was the ACTFL president. So that wasn't too long ago. Talk to me a little bit about the process of becoming the ACTFL president and what that entailed in terms of like holding your full-time job, but also being the ACTFL president.
Um, well, the process, actually anyone can, be there. There's a nomination process that you can read about on the ACTFL website. And at the time, though, and I think that they put this back in actually, the American Association of Teachers of Japanese nominated me because I had been president of that organization, and then they and then a nominating committee at the ACTFL side, just like many boards, a nominating committee produces a slate, and then there's an actual election that's sort of like they have a company that runs it and everything like that. And I was amazingly lucky enough to win. And then it was 2021, so it was really tricky. Normally, as ACTFL president, you would spend the whole time, you would spend a lot of time traveling to at least each of the 5 regions for their conferences. And I wasn't able to do that because of COVID. So I did all of those conferences from my from my office at home in my yoga pants. And then my conference turned out to be virtual as well, which was sad because it was supposed to be in San Diego. And normally you would get to, design the opening session and decide what the music would be and give a speech to about, 7,000 people, and it was going to be fun, but that's okay. We managed to make a really, I think, high quality online experience. It was great because I did get to go to the Japanese consulate for the day in Washington, D.C., and we filmed tea ceremony. It was really fun to do that. One of the highlights of my life, really, to do that. And in terms of being on the board, it was the greatest professional experience of my life. I got to, for a year, drive how meetings went, drive how we worked. We redid our strategic plan during that time. So that was a really impactful process for me. And I really enjoyed thinking through that kind of thing and how we would organize it, how we would organize the groups to think about it, and how to organize for action planning and stuff. So that helps me in my job now when we do strategic planning here in New Haven. So that was wonderful. And of course, the people on a board like ACTFL's are all these incredible, not just, I can't even think of the right word because it's beyond just one word. They have so much to give to the profession. They've already given so much, and then there's a wide range of perspectives. So you learn from every person. And my biggest regret is that we didn't get to, have a lot of dinners together or anything like that because of COVID. So the few times we were able to meet, it was great. And then the other thing I would say is it's a 3-year term. So you're president-elect, then president, then past president. And I think that's such a beautiful structure because the woman who was president before me, Bridget Yaden, was just terrific and, shepherded me through everything.
Well, thanks for sharing. I think that's really, helpful for people to know if they want to serve on that national level. Like you said, getting that nomination from your organization. It could it be a state organization, a regional organization, or like the Association of Teachers of that language?
I believe that they've recently changed the that recommendation part a little bit. So I would just advise that you go to the ACTFL website and look for ACTFL board members nominations, and it'll tell whatever the most updated process is for this year.
Okay. Yeah, I think, like you said, even though you weren't able to meet the people in person very much, you were able to, get a lot done, put on that online conference,
Yeah,
have a lot of influence in terms of, the standards and really the thought process as you move forward, kind of out of the pandemic after
right.
your
Thank God for
presidency.
Zoom, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've had a great conversation today talking about your experience teaching Japanese, your experience working with teachers in your district and at the state and national level. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
Oh my goodness. Um, well, we haven't really talked about it, but I did think about this ahead of time, and I think that the most important thing for all of us in education is to just love kids. This we didn't really talk about, but that as I've watched so many teachers come and go, and some teachers be successful and some teachers not successful. I feel like that's the one thing I just want to ask in interviews. Like, do you love kids? Tell me about your experiences just being joyful with kids, because I can teach teachers how to do things. And most of the stuff they need to know how to do, they need to learn in the job anyway. A lot of it's really hard for them to know how to do everything walking in the door, even with the best preparation programs. But they absolutely have to have at their core a love for the kids and want to talk to the kids and be around the kids. And kids know that in a second. The older they get, the better that, well, actually, at every age, they know it. So that would be it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important to point out because, like you said, you've seen a lot of teachers come and go. There are people that have teaching as a second profession.
Hmm.
It is very much a client-facing profession, and you have to be a people person, and you might have some difficult days, either there with colleagues or in terms of classroom management. But at the core, realizing that they are kids, they have the developing brain, and it's don't take it personally, right? If
Yeah, right. That's
there are
the
some
other
of those
hint, right?
difficult days. Yeah. Well, where can people connect with you and find you online?
I'm on Blue Sky at JHAXHI at, how I don't know the whole Blue Sky thing. I still keep my Twitter account, but I don't look at it that much. I'm on LinkedIn. You can probably just search my full name. And we do have a public website for the district that I'll share with you for your notes.
Okay. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for being my guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today.
What a
Uh,
pleasure. Thank you.